Hi everyone, so today I'm going to show you how to make a gluten-free plaited bread. It's actually more simple than you would imagine. We plait it just like ordinary bread, but it does require quite a lot of proving. So if you want to make this recipe, please read it in full on our website first, because ideally you want to actually do the proving overnight, so allow yourself plenty of time to make it. Now the first thing I'm actually going to do, and you'll wonder why I've got a hob here, is that I'm actually going to make almost like a roux. Now what this does is it helps to thicken the dough and makes it easier for us to plait. So I'm going to just put in a pan a little bit of the bread gluten-free flour. So I've got 30 grams here, and that's going to go in. And then over a low heat, what I'm going to do is just heat it up very slowly with a small amount of water. Now, all the ingredients are on the website, and this is around about 100 mils of water. Now, I'm going to just add this slowly, and over a low heat, it needs to be a low heat, just stir it, just like you were making a roux sauce. And what you'll find is that it will start to thicken. When it becomes very thick, just take it off the heat and continue to beat it until it's nice and smooth. So once it's lovely and smooth, we're then going to add 100 mils of either dairy-free milk or ordinary milk, depending on whether you are dairy-free or not. And again, we're just going to stir that through. What that will also do is just warm up the milk so it's nice and tepid. We're not going to be overheating the milk because obviously we want to then add it to our dough, and we don't want to kill the yeast. And then to that, we're going to add about 30 grams of either honey, maple syrup, or another liquid sweetener of your choice. This is a sweet bread, a challah bread, and it's just got a nice warm sweet flavour with some cinnamon and orange oil as well. So once that is nice and smooth, we can then start making our dough in the food processor. Okay, so once you've made your milk mixture, your roux, we can now, using a food processor, just make the rest of the dough. So what we're going to use is strong bread flour. This is gluten-free bread flour. If you want ideas for how to make your own, there is a blog on my website which talks about gluten-free flours and how to combine them. This is one by Doves Farm, and this is 420 grams of gluten-free bread flour. You do need to use the bread flour. Now to that, we're going to add some other dry ingredients. First of all, we've got some xanthum gum. Now I'm actually using 1.5 teaspoons, which is a reasonable amount, but in order to plait it, we do need that xanthum gum to help bind it. Now you might be able to use something like psyllium husk. I haven't tried it, but I suspect it would work anyway. Then we've got a couple of tablespoons of ordinary sugar. This will help for the yeast to rise and just some additional sweetness, because this is a sweet bread. And then a little bit of cream of tartar is going in as well. And then we've got our yeast. 2 teaspoons of dry yeast, that's going in. And then we've got some flavourings. So this is orange oil. Now you could just use orange zest from fresh oranges instead. I like the orange oil, it's just a couple of drops really, it's very strong, but this is a nice concentrated flavour. and then some cinnamon. That's optional, but again, it gives a lovely warming flavour, around about half a teaspoon. Okay, so that's our dry ingredients. So we're just going to quickly blitz those and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. Now it's worth saying that if you actually have a bread maker, you could do all this in the bread maker and just set it to proof. So, you know, if you do have a bread maker, rather than just mixing it up in a food processor, you could just use your bread maker instead. So now we're going to add the milk roux that we made. So that's all going in. Okay. And again, don't worry if your roux looks slightly lumpy, because we're going to blend it up anyway. And then we've got a couple more ingredients. The fat really gives a lovely richness to this bread. So we've got 70 grams either of dairy-free spread or butter, again depending on whether you're dairy-free, and then 3 eggs. So these are some small to medium eggs, not large eggs. If you have large eggs, you'll probably only need 2. And that's all the ingredients. So now what we're going to do is give that a good blitz until it's nicely mixed. Now what you should find, just give it a couple of minutes, is that it will form a very thick batter. So once it's a nice thick batter, we're then going to put it into a glass bowl, so a clean glass bowl, and we're then going to cover it. Now at this point, and this is really why you need to be thinking in advance, we're going to cover it and leave it at room temperature for around about an hour, and it will be nice and springy at that point. Now after an hour, we're then going to put it in the fridge overnight, or effectively 12 hours. So you do need to allow time, and the reason we chill it is because when you chill it, so we're allowing it to rise first, then we will chill it. By chilling it, it makes it a lot easier to then plait. Okay, so after 12 hours, take it out the fridge and you'll see that it should be lovely and airy and springy. So use it now as it's cold. Don't take it out and leave it to prove. You want to actually start plaiting it when it is nice and chilled. At this point, you're going to need to dust it fairly liberally with gluten-free bread flour. Dust your hands as well. It's going to be easier. Now, you will find that it is sticky, but don't worry. What we're going to be doing is just rolling it in the bread flour to make it easier. So just make sure that it's going to be easier by coating it in the bread flour. And we're going to plait this, so we're going to need to cut it into 3 equal pieces. Now you might want to actually weigh the dough to make sure that they are equal. So with a knife, cut it, and again it will be quite sticky, don't worry, because we're going to roll it again in the flour. So once you have your equal pieces, again you're going to sprinkle them with a little bit of gluten-free bread flour. Take 2 of them away, and then what we're going to do is put down a sheet of baking parchment. We're going to dust that with some flour again. Oops. And you're going to roll out each of the pieces to form a long sausage shape. Don't make them too thin, otherwise it's going to be harder for you to plait. So to start plaiting, we're going to take the top part and we're going to join it together. Now you'll find that the dough is fairly sticky, so that should be fairly easy. That's our top. And then we're going to do a traditional plait. So again, you will need to make sure you've got space and you have some flour. So take this right hand side over the middle in a traditional plait, and then take the very left end and place that in the middle. If that top bit seal comes off, don't worry, it is wet enough for you to then just join it again. And then we're just going to repeat that same plait. So over, and then take the left one into the middle. And you should be able to do a number of plaits until you get to the end. Now when you get to the end, you're just going to seal the base. Now at this point, you can just neaten it up. Now just before you leave it to prove, what I find useful is to place your dough first on a baking tray. So you should have a nice rectangular baking tray lined with extra baking parchment, but don't try and take it off your existing parchment. Simply place the whole thing on your baking tray, like so. You can then trim later that excess baking parchment. This time, by doing it this way, I find it so much easier without disturbing the rise. So get it onto your baking tray, then just cover it either with cling or a tea towel and leave it for about an hour. So after about an hour, you'll find that your bread has risen really nicely. And at this point, we want to get the oven on, and we're going to give it a brush. This is an egg wash, so it's just a beaten egg with about sort of a tablespoon of water. Beat it well, and then very, very lightly, we're going to brush it all over. Try and get in those little creases where you've plaited it, but don't obviously press down too much because you don't want to flatten your bread at all. And you can see this is why it's a good idea to get it on your baking tray, because at this point it will be very light and delicate. So brush it all over, and once you've done that, if you want to, you can then sprinkle with a few sesame seeds. I like to add a few seeds. You could use poppy seeds as well, just gives it a nice texture. And then you need to get your oven on 190 degrees C, so it's not overly high for bread, and you're going to cook it initially for about 15 minutes, and then if it's browning too much, just cover it with a little bit of foil, but you'll probably in total need to cook it for about 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm just going to sprinkle with some sesame seeds, and then we're going to get it in the oven.